We think of history as a game of numbers. The bigger army wins. The side with more cannons, more guns, more men dictates the outcome. But there's a day in the 17th century that breaks this rule so completely it sounds like fiction. A day when 3,600 men faced an army of 11,000. An army dug in on high ground, bristling with pikes and muskets. The smaller force wasn't just supposed to lose, they were supposed to be annihilated. Instead, they delivered one of the most complete and terrifying destructions of an army in the history of warfare. In 20 minutes, a kingdom's power was broken. A king was sent fleeing for his life, his finest commanders dead at his feet. This is the story of how 3,600 Polish-Lithuanian Hussars destroyed 11,000 Swedes at the Battle of Kircholm. If you value documented history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is based on deep research into military history, drawing from detailed analyses like Robert Frost's foundational work, The Northern Wars, which provides the political and strategic context, and the granular equipment studies in Richard Brzezinski's publications for Osprey Publishing, which reconstruct the specific arms and armor used by the Hussars. Now back to the information. Our story begins not with a battle, but with a family feud, a fight over a crown. Drenched in the fires of the Reformation, on one side, you have Sigismund III Vasa. He is the elected king of the vast Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a sprawling multi-ethnic empire. But by blood, he is also the rightful heir to the throne of Sweden. His father was King John III of Sweden, his mother, Catherine Jagiellon, a Polish princess. This union was meant to bind the two powers together. Instead, it tore them apart. Sigismund was raised in Poland by his mother as a devout Catholic. This put him on a collision course with the powerful Swedish nobility, who, under his uncle Charles, had become fiercely Lutheran. For them, a Catholic king was not just a political problem, it was a spiritual threat. On the other side, you have that uncle, Charles, the Duke of Sturmenland. He is ambitious, ruthless, and a champion of the Protestant cause. While Sigismund is in Poland, Charles consolidates power in Sweden, positioning himself as the defender of the nation and the faith. In 1598, Sigismund lands in Sweden with an army to assert his authority. The result is the Battle of Stungebro. It is a disaster for Sigismund. His forces are defeated by his uncle's army. He is forced to flee back to Poland, effectively abandoning his birthright. Charles seizes the moment. He orchestrates the execution of Sigismund's key supporters in what becomes known as the Linkping bloodbath. By 1604, he pushes aside all legal claims and has himself crowned King Charles IX of Sweden. But Sigismund, from his throne in Krakow, never relinquishes his claim. This family soap opera, a bitter rivalry between uncle and nephew, now plunges two kingdoms into war. The prize is Livonia, a critical territory controlling the trade routes of the eastern Baltic. It is here that the Polish-Swedish War of 1600 to 1611 will be fought. By the summer of 1605, the war is a catastrophe for the Commonwealth. Charles IX, a brilliant administrator and military organizer, has landed in Livonia with a massive state-of-the-art army. He lands at Reval, modern-day Tallinn, with an initial force of 5,000 men, then marches down the coast, his numbers swelling. He is joined by another 5,000 troops under the command of Anders Lennartson, the veteran governor of Livonia. By the time he reaches the gates of Riga, the most important city in the region, his army numbers over 14,000 men. Riga is under siege, its walls crumbling under the relentless bombardment of Swedish artillery. The entire province is on the verge of collapse. Holding the line for the Commonwealth is one man, the Grand Hetman of Lithuania, Jan Karol Chodkiewicz. His position is not just difficult, it is impossible. The Commonwealth's political system is a mess. The parliament, the same, is paralyzed by infighting among the nobility. They see the war in distant Livonia as a provincial squabble, not a national crisis. They refuse to pass the taxes needed to fund the army. As a result, Chodkiewicz's soldiers have not been paid in months, some for over a year. They are a ghost army. On paper, he has a respectable force. In reality, men are deserting in droves every single day. They are starving. Their clothes are rags, and their weapons are in disrepair. Morale has hit rock bottom. While Charles IX commands a well-fed, well-paid professional army, Chodkiewicz is reduced to begging his own men not to mutiny. He uses his vast personal wealth, the fortune of one of the most powerful magnate families in Lithuania, to buy food and supplies, to pay his soldiers a fraction of what they are owed. To hold the army together with promises and sheer force of will, Chodkiewicz is a military prodigy, educated at universities in Ingolstadt and Padua, a veteran of campaigns against the Ottomans. He understands warfare on a level few of his contemporaries can match. He knows he cannot win a war of attrition. He doesn't have the men, the money, or the supplies. His only option is the one thing every military textbook warns against: to seek a decisive, open-field battle against a vastly superior enemy. It is a desperate, suicidal gamble. He gathers his remaining loyal troops, a force of barely 4,000 men, and begins a forced march toward Riga. He is not marching to relieve the siege. He is marching to challenge the entire Swedish army to a fight to the death. News of Chodkiewicz's approach reaches the Swedish camp. King Charles IX is ecstatic. His commanders, men like Anders Lennartson, urge caution. They advise the king to use his overwhelming numerical advantage to simply wait. Chodkiewicz's army is starving. It will dissolve on its own without a single shot being fired. But Charles is a man of immense pride and a fiery temper. He sees the approaching force not as a threat, but as an insult. He dismisses them as a breakfast snack. He has spent years reforming the Swedish military along the most modern Dutch lines. Creating a professional army of musketeers and pikemen, he is convinced it is invincible. On the night of September 26th, against the advice of his generals, he makes the fateful decision. He will take the core of his army, 10,868 men and 7 heavy cannons, and march out to crush this impudent Polish-Lithuanian force once and for all. The Swedish army abandons the siege lines around Riga and marches south through the night. The weather is miserable, a cold autumn rain turning the roads into a quagmire of mud. The soldiers, roused from their camps, march 10 miles in the dark. They are exhausted, hungry, and soaked by the time they arrive near the small town of Kircholm at dawn on September 27th, 1605. They deploy their forces on a commanding ridge with a clear view of the surrounding countryside. It is a textbook defensive position. The high ground gives their artillery a perfect field of fire. Their flanks are secure. It is from this position of strength that they watch Chodkiewicz's tiny army arrive and form up on the plain below. The sight that greets the Commonwealth soldiers is enough to break any man's spirit. Before them, arranged in a vast checkerboard formation, is a sea of Swedish steel. Charles has 7,200 infantry, the backbone of his army. They are a mix of German mercenaries and Swedish conscripts, all drilled in the revolutionary tactics of Maurice of Nassau. They are organized into 13 infantry squares, or tercios. At the core of each tercio is a block of pikemen, wielding massive 18-foot pikes, their sharpened steel tips forming an impenetrable hedge against cavalry. On the flanks of the pikes are the musketeers, armed with heavy matchlock muskets. They are trained to fire in volleys, one rank firing and then stepping back to reload while the next rank fires, creating a continuous stream of lead. The army also boasts 3,500 cavalry, mostly German raiders, armored pistoliers who fight from horseback. It is a modern, disciplined, and terrifyingly large force. Against this behemoth, Chodkiewicz arrays his paltry army. He has just 3,690 men and 5 small cannons. His force is the mirror opposite of the Swedish army. He has only about 1,000 infantry, mostly Hungarian-style Hajdukes, who are no match for the Swedish pike formations. The strength of his army, its very soul, is its 2,600 cavalry. And at the heart of that cavalry are 1,300 of the most fearsome mounted warriors of the age, the Winged Hussars. To understand the Battle of Kircholm, you must understand the Hussar. He is not simply a soldier, he is a complete weapon system. The culmination of centuries of Eastern European cavalry warfare. He is a nobleman, a member of the Polish-Lithuanian Szlachta, who has been trained for war since he was a boy. He is encased in steel, a thick cuirass to stop a musket ball, interlocking plates protecting his shoulders and arms, and a distinctive lobster-tailed pot helmet, the Zishaga Arts, with a sliding nasal guard to protect his face. Over his armor, he often wears the pelt of a leopard or a wolf, a symbol of his ferocity and status. His primary weapon is the kopia, a lance that can be up to 20 feet long. It is a masterpiece of engineering. To save weight, the shaft is hollowed out, making it light enough to be wielded with one hand, yet its length gives it incredible reach. It is designed with a deliberate weak point, so it shatters upon impact, transferring every ounce of the charging horse's momentum into its steel tip. It is a one-shot weapon of absolute devastation. Once the kopia is broken, the hussar is a mobile arsenal. Tucked under his saddle is the kunsurs, a 5-foot-long, armor-piercing sword used for stabbing downward into the melee. At his side hangs the sabla, a heavy, curved saber, one of the finest cutting swords ever designed, perfect for scything through unarmored infantry. Many also carry a pair of wheel-lock pistols and saddle holsters. They ride powerful, specially bred chargers, a cross between sturdy Polish horses and agile Tartar steeds. trained to charge into a wall of pikes and gunfire without flinching. And then there are the wings, these iconic arcs of wood adorned with eagle, vulture, or falcon feathers, are mounted either to the back of the cuirass or the saddle. Their purpose is still debated. Some accounts claim they made a terrifying, high-pitched whistling noise as the hussars charged, unnerving enemy soldiers and horses. Others suggest they were designed to defeat the lassos of Tatar horsemen, but their primary purpose was likely psychological. To the terrified infantrymen on the ground, the charging hussar did not look like a man on a horse. He looked bigger, supernatural, an avenging angel of death descending upon them with righteous fury. Chodkiewicz surveys the battlefield. He is outnumbered 3-1. The enemy holds the high ground. His infantry is a token force. A direct assault would be suicide. His only hope is to outthink his opponent, to turn the enemy's strength into a weakness. He deploys his small infantry contingent in the center as bait. On his left flank, he places a squadron of 300 hussars under the command of Tomasz Dabrowa. On his right, a larger force of 650 hussars under Jan Piotr Sapieha. In the center, concealed behind his infantry and a slight rise in the ground, he holds his main reserve, 900 of his best hussars, directly under his own command. He extends his front line with his light cavalry, the pity horsey, to make his army appear larger than it actually is. Then, he gives the order that will seal the fate of the Swedish army. He commands a small vanguard of his light horsemen to ride forward, skirmish briefly with the Swedish lines, and then execute a panicked, feigned retreat. Imagine you are a Swedish musketeer on that ridge. You have been standing in formation for 4 hours. The sun is rising. The rain has stopped, but you're still cold and damp from the night march. You look down at the enemy, so few of them. Impatience gnaws at you. Your king, Charles IX, is equally impatient. He sees the enemy cavalry ride forward, exchange a few shots, and then turn and flee in apparent chaos. This is it. This confirms all his arrogant assumptions. The enemy is weak, undisciplined, and already broken. He turns to his generals and gives the order. General, advance. Your officers scream the commands. The drummers beat out the rhythm for the march. And the entire Swedish army, a machine of 11,000 men, begins to lurch forward. You abandon your perfect defensive position on the high ground. You march down the slope, your neat checkerboard formations becoming stretched and disordered as you navigate the uneven, marshy ground and cross a small stream. You are leaving your fortress and marching, step by agonizing step, into a perfectly laid trap. Chodkiewicz watches from his position, his gamble paying off beyond his wildest dreams. The Swedes have abandoned the high ground. Their lines are disorganized. Their artillery is being left behind as the infantry advances. He waits until the first Swedish units are struggling up the slope towards his position. Then he gives the signal. On the Polish-Lithuanian left, Tomasz Dabrowa's 300 hussars begin their charge. They don't aim for the front of the Swedish line. They wheel out wide, their horses building speed, and aim for the exposed flank of the Swedish right wing. As they begin to move, Chodkiewicz's infantry in the center fires a devastating volley. Their muskets and 5 small cannons, loaded with grape shot, rip into the front ranks of the advancing Swedes, causing chaos and confusion. The Swedish right wing, commanded by Joachim Frederick of Mansfeld, tries to pivot to face the oncoming hussar charge. It is impossible. It is like trying to turn a freight train on a dime. The hussars are moving too fast. The ground shakes as 300 armored chargers thunder towards them. The hussars lower their 20-foot lances, the colorful pennants fluttering, and hit the flank of the Swedish infantry. The impact is an explosion of wood, steel, and flesh. The lances, backed by the full momentum of horse and rider, strike with enough force to punch through a man's armor, through his body, and into the man standing behind him. The front rank of Swedish pikemen simply ceases to exist. The supposedly impenetrable wall of pikes is breached in an instant. The lances shatter as designed, and the hussars are now inside the formation, a place no cavalry should ever be. They draw their long conquer swords and heavy sabers. A pike is useless in a close-quarters brawl. The hussars are a whirlwind of death, their swords rising and falling, their powerful horses trampling men underfoot. The disciplined Swedish tercio, the pinnacle of modern infantry tactics, dissolves into a screaming, terrified mob in less than a minute. Mansfeld's entire right wing collapses. King Charles IX, watching from the center, sees the catastrophe unfolding. He reacts quickly, ordering his elite cavalry reserve, 400 German riders under Heinrich von Brandt, to countercharge and save his collapsing flank. But Chodkiewicz has anticipated this. He has been holding his own reserve for this very moment. As the Swedish riders surge forward, he unleashes another unit of hussars he had kept hidden. They slam into the flank of the charging riders. The riders are trained to fight with pistols, using the Kircholm tactic. Trot forward, fire a volley, and wheel away to reload. This cautious, almost timid tactic is hopelessly outmatched by the sheer violence of a hussar charge. The hussars don't stop to shoot. They hit the riders at full gallop, their lances breaking the charge before it can even form. The elite Swedish cavalry is shattered and driven from the field in disgrace. If you appreciate this level of detail, digging into the tactical decisions that turn the tide of battle, consider subscribing to the channel. It lets us continue to produce deeply researched historical content. Now, let's get back to the slaughter at Kircholm. While the Swedish right is being annihilated, the same horror is unfolding on the other side of the battlefield. The main Polish-Lithuanian right wing, 650 hussars led by Jan Piotr Sapieha, smashes into the Swedish left flank, commanded by Anders Lennartsson himself. The result is identical. The hussars crash through the pike formations as if they were made of paper. Lennartsson is killed in the brutal melee, and his entire flank disintegrates. The Swedish army is now no longer an army. It is a panicked mob, being attacked from both flanks and from the rear. Its center, a massive block of 7 infantry squares, is still intact, but it is now completely surrounded. A lonely island in a sea of victorious Polish-Lithuanian cavalry. Now comes the final, decisive blow. Jan Karol Chodkiewicz places himself at the head of his last and largest Reserve 900 Winged Hussars, the veterans, the elite of his army. He leads them in one final, thunderous charge directly into the heart of the remaining Swedish infantry. The Swedish musketeers, their hands shaking, desperately try to reload their cumbersome weapons. The reloading process for a matchlock musket is a slow, 18-step ballet of powder, wadding, and ramrod. They have no time. The hussars are closing the distance at 50 feet per second. A ragged, desperate volley of musket fire erupts. It is inaccurate and ineffective. A few hussars and their horses go down, but the charge is a tidal wave that cannot be stopped. 900 lances hit the Swedish center simultaneously. The battle is over. What comes next is simply butchery. The Swedish army breaks. All discipline, all cohesion vanishes. It is every man for himself. Soldiers throw down their 18-foot pikes, their heavy muskets, anything that might slow them down, and they run. They run for the woods, for the river, for the road back to Riga. Now Chodkiewicz unleashes his light cavalry, the Cossacks and Tartars. These are not shock troops. They are pursuers, experts at hunting down a broken and fleeing enemy. For miles around the battlefield, for the next several hours, they ride down the terrified Swedes, cutting them down without mercy. King Charles IX is caught in the rout. His horse is shot out from under him. He falls to the ground, and for a moment, the King of Sweden is just another panicked soldier in the mud, about to be killed or captured. At that moment, a young Livonian nobleman named Henrik von Wrede sees the king's plight. He rides up, dismounts, and gives his own horse to the king, shouting at him to flee and save the kingdom. Charles escapes, riding for his life all the way back to his ships waiting off the coast. Henrik von Wrede is swarmed by Commonwealth cavalry and killed moments later, a final act of sacrifice in a day of total disaster. The pursuit only ends when the Polish-Lithuanian soldiers are physically too exhausted to kill anymore. The field of Kircholm is a carpet of the dead and dying. The Swedish army has been erased from existence. Of the nearly 11,000 men Charles led into battle that morning, as many as 9,000 are dead, wounded, or captured. It is a casualty rate approaching 85%. An entire generation of Sweden's military leadership is dead on the field. Anders Lennartsson is dead. Duke Frederick of Lindbergh is dead. The list of high-ranking dead and captured officers is staggering. All 69 of their regimental standards and all 7 of their heavy cannons are captured. In contrast, the Polish-Lithuanian losses are so small as to be unbelievable. Approximately 100 killed and 200 wounded. In a single, brutal engagement that lasted no more than 30 minutes, Chodkiewicz had achieved one of the most lopsided victories in the history of warfare. The news of Kircholm stunned Europe. It was considered a miracle. Pope Paul V sent a personal letter of congratulations to Chodkiewicz. The Ottoman Sultan Ahmed I and the Shah of Persia, Abbas the Great, sent envoys to praise the victor. King James I of England publicly lauded Chodkiewicz's military genius. In Sweden, the defeat was a national trauma, a wound that would take decades to heal. The king was humiliated, his new army destroyed, his treasury emptied. But here's the final bitter truth that reframes this glorious victory. Kircholm was a tactical masterpiece, but it was a strategic dead end. Chodkiewicz had won the battle, but he was powerless to win the war. The heroes of his army, the hussars who had performed this incredible feat of arms, were still unpaid. The The Commonwealth Sejm, stunned by the victory, still failed to approve the necessary taxes. Within weeks of their triumph, Chodkiewicz's victorious army began to dissolve. The soldiers, having looted the rich Swedish camp for their long overdue pay, simply packed up and went home. The hetman, the hero of Christendom, was left with a skeleton force, too weak to capitalize on his victory. He could not even mount a proper siege to retake Riga. The war he should have won dragged on for another 6 years, a grinding stalemate. The 69 captured Swedish banners were hung in the Wawel Cathedral in Krakow, a proud testament to an impossible victory, but they were also a silent monument to a tragic, wasted opportunity. The battlefield genius of one man and the unparalleled courage of his soldiers could not overcome the political weakness and short-sightedness of their own nation. The charge at Kircholm was the glorious, terrifying peak of the Winged Hussars, but its hollow aftermath was a dark omen for the future of the Commonwealth itself.